Hey everybody, Grumbles here with another air combat video, and today, after having some jet-powered aircraft lately in recent videos, we go into the completely opposite direction with some World War I biplane footage. Now, as I've said some time ago, I am actively looking into more simulators to try to expand the variety on the channel a bit, and one of those simulators I obviously want to take a look at is Rise of Flight, a World War I flight simulator. With Rise of Flight in the roster too, I think we are covering all the areas from World War I over World War II and the more modern planes and helicopters in DCS all the way up to spaceships in Star Citizen. So, since I just got some time to try it out a bit and fly a few quick missions, I thought I'd make a quick video and talk a little bit about this simulator. Show a little bit of footage and talk a little bit about what you get in Rise of Flight, just to give you a quick overview of the title. And I also thought I want to give a little bit of an overview of the different planes that were used in World War I, and in this video I thought I'd start with the Fokker DR.I, one of the German triplanes. Now, Rise of Flight is a little bit of an older simulator in comparison. It originally came out in 2009, and I did play it briefly back then. That was of course before it was on Steam in its current form. Back then the game was not free to play and you had to buy it, though the business model was already similar to what it is now, with add-on planes to buy. But a while ago the game was converted to a free-to-play model, and now it works similar like it does in DCS World. The main game is free to play and includes a few planes, and you can buy more planes and other add-ons for it. Now, Rise of Flight is an older game, and naturally World War I planes are not quite as complex as more modern ones you see, for example, in DCS, but the planes are also comparatively cheap in Rise of Flight, generally about $5 to $6 for a fighter plane. The planes that come for free are the Albatros D.VII, the Spad 13 and the Newport 17. And a large number of the World War I fighters and bombers that saw service are available for purchase in the game, though there are some, maybe a little bit lesser known ones that I would like to see added that aren't there yet, like some of the Austrian fighters for example. But all the well-known ones, the Fokker DR.I s, Sopwith Camels and Spads are all there. And just like in other simulators like it, you get a single-player mode with quick missions and campaigns and an editor. And of course there's a multiplayer mode as well, which I will also take a look at in the future, I hope. Now, as I've said, Rise of Flight is overall a little bit of an older simulator, though I think from the graphics point of view it still looks quite nice. It is, however, among the combat flight simulators I am currently playing, the one with the smallest active player base at the moment, I would say, so you don't find that many full servers all the time. There are, however, a few over the weekends that seem to be decently populated with a good ping, which I will take a look at further down the line. On the weekends when I took a quick look first at the game, I did find a nice and populated server in the UK, but I did not record that, and as I've said, in the last days I did not find much populated servers, so the footage in this video is from a single player mode. Now, the AI in Rise of Flight is not bad, though it is of course still just AI, but it is good enough to provide some entertainment. So let's talk a little bit about World War I air combat and its representation in Rise of Flight. Now, World War I air combat is of course an interesting topic, as it, as the name Rise of Flight suggests, is pretty much the dawn of aviation and air combat. While aircraft of course existed before World War I, for the most part they were not taken too seriously yet by most, and their use was limited. The arms race during World War I jump-started many of the developments that led to modern aviation. A lot of the instrumentation and procedures that were developed in the 20s and 30s that would shape aviation were developed because of the rise of large air forces and the importance of the airplane during World War I. An interesting book to read about those developments in the 20s and 30s is Jimmy Doolittle's memoirs, by the way, if you're interested in those things. Anyway, it is interesting to fly some of those famous early fighters in a simulator that spearheaded those early developments. Also, because the flying is of course very different than you are used to from World War II simulators or even modern planes, it is also nice to have the variety. For example, on average a World War I fighter plane's engine produced about 180 horsepower in the later years of the war, and its maximum speed was around 180 kph on average. In comparison, the Hawker Fury biplanes you get as earliest planes in War Thunder, for example, they have about 3 to 4 times as much horsepower and are twice as fast. Now, flying those much lighter and slower World War I era biplanes is quite different, and another set of skills to learn and maneuvers to perform that won't work like this in more modern planes. Rise of Flight simulates those planes and their abilities quite nicely, I would say. Now those early fighters are of course simpler in comparison, with only a few instruments in the cockpit and only throttle, radiator and mixture to worry about, and even mixture and radiator controls you won't have on all the planes. That makes it a good simulator to start getting into combat flight sims, I would say, but this lack of technical complexity does not mean that mastering and flying them is easy. Those early biplane fighters were also often quite fragile and had the tendency to lose wings when in a dive, for example. You really need to know the limits of your aircraft or it will fall apart on you very fast. And most of those planes don't have an airspeed indicator either. Also, while those lightweight Rotary I biplanes are of course extremely agile and can turn on a dime with their very low wing loading, like every plane, they will stall if you overdo it, and the thin wings used on those fighters often have unpleasant stall characteristics. Many of those old fighters have a tendency to enter nasty spin if you're not careful. So while the planes are very agile, you do have to learn to use them properly to unlock their full maneuvering potential without ending up in a spin. One of the planes where I think this is very true is the one I want to talk a little bit more about in this video, the Fokker DR.I triplane fighter. I figured this is a good plane to take a look at in a first Rise of Flight video, as the DR.I is one of the iconic and most recognizable planes of this era. It is generally considered the plane that the Red Baron, Manfred von Richthofen, flew, though in reality he flew other planes more than the Fokker DR.I. Still, most people when they think about World War I fighters, they think about the Red Baron's Red Fokker DR.I triplane. The DR.I is one of the two planes I picked up for Rise of Flight at the moment, the other being the Royal Aircraft Factory SA-5. I picked those two up because they are complete opposites of each other, which I thought would be interesting. With the SA-5 being a very fast plane for World War I standards, but also quite heavy and not a great turner. Good for high-speed slashing attacks, and a first glimpse of in which direction air combat would evolve towards and during World War II. The Fokker DR.I on the other hand is, to give a World War II equivalent, a Zero, slow but a great turn rate and a good climber. The plane entered service in late 1917 and it was developed as a response to the British Sopwith Triplane, which showed up in late 1916, early 1917. Now the Sopwith Triplane was, big surprise, a triplane, and like the DR.I later, very maneuverable and a very good turner. The performance of this plane impressed the pilots from the German Fliegertruppe sufficiently that a copy of the plane was demanded from the German aircraft industry, and quite a few started working on such a prototype. Fokker modified a biplane prototype they were already working on and eventually came up with the Fokker DR.I. Now, that is not a copy of the Sopwith triplane, but a new development, also using a triplane configuration. The plane turned out to be quite successful though, and is nowadays the most famous German fighter from World War I. It is slow as it is only powered by a 110 horsepower rotary engine, much weaker than a 160 to 180 horsepower Mercedes inline engine used in other German fighters at the time. By the way, rotary engines used in World War I fighters are not to be confused with pistonless Wankel engines, which are also called rotary engines and are these days way more common. The rotary engines that were used in the DR.I as well as many other World War I fighters like the Sopwith Camel are a completely different design though. Similar in appearance to a radial engine, with the pistons arranged in a ring around the crankshaft. However, in a radial as well as other traditional piston engines, the pistons move a rotating crankshaft. With the rotary engine, the crankshaft is fixed to the plane and not moving, and the entire engine block instead rotates, with the propeller mounted on the engine. That does create a bit of torque that has to be taken into account when flying the plane. The use of an alternative engine though was required, as the supply of the stronger Mercedes inline engine was limited. Anyway, the plane, thanks to its weaker engine, was pretty slow, but with its light weight also extremely maneuverable and a great turner. As mentioned though, unlike what the developers of some other games might think, having a low wing loading and being a good turner does not mean you are immune to stalls and spins. You do have to get a little bit of a feeling for the little DR.I in order to really throw it around the sky without getting it into a spin and crashing. But that makes the plane a lot more fun in my opinion. If you actually have something to do in the cockpit in order to get the best maneuverability out of the plane, instead of just pulling the stick back into your guts and call it a day because the plane can't stall or spin anyway. Once you do get a bit of a feeling for the DR.I triplane though, there's quite a few cool things you can do with this plane. and few planes can keep up with its maneuverability and ability to suddenly flip around and change its direction very fast in a way that heavier World War II planes simply will not be able to do. Another example for a nice maneuver you can do in this plane, and the DR.I is somewhat known for, is its ability to slip turn very well. Now, a slip turn is a turn only using the plane's rudder, while using the ailerons to keep it level, basically skidding sideways or drifting. The DR.I doesn't have a fixed vertical stabilizer with a rudder on it, like it is traditionally done. Instead, the entire vertical tail plane is moving as a rudder. That, as well as some other factors, allow the DR.I to slip turn extremely well, flying in ways that you otherwise only see from helicopters, which can be used, for example, in head-on passes to get a shot at an opponent while not actually flying straight at him, or as a defensive maneuver to make someone overshoot, or a variety of other things. This, in combination with the general ability of the plane to do incredible aerobatics once you get the feel for it, makes it a force to be reckoned with in a close-range fight. However, most planes can escape from the DR.I in a dive, and the light DR.I isn't too fast in a dive to begin with, and on top of that you have to be careful not to get too fast or your wings will rip off. Again, somewhat similar to a Zero in this regard, extremely maneuverable, but not able to catch an opponent that dives away from you. Armament-wise, the plane is armed with these two air-cooled variants of the MG-08, giving the plane a pretty good firepower for its time. Well, that's a bit of an overview of the Fokker DR.I as well as Rise of Flight in general. Just a quick introduction to the game I wanted to make. I think Rise of Flight is gonna be one of those simulators that show up a bit more often on the channel in the future. I hope I can bring you some footage of the multiplayer mode soon as well. Now, I also experiment a little bit with some picture-in-picture stuff in this video, since Rise of Flight's replay system is quite accurate and well suited for this, and I hope I will also use this a little bit more in the future. And well, this is it for this video. I hope it was informative, thanks for watching, and maybe I'll see you next time.